Welcome to Teach Cloud's webinar on helping children cope with big emotions. We're really happy to have all of you here. My name is Wendy Oke and I'm the founder of Teach Cloud. Before we introduce our guest speaker, Saskia Joss, I just want to take you through a little bit of what Teach Cloud does. So Teach Cloud is a cloud-based management application for early childhood educators, parents, and owners of preschool and daycare services. So you can see that we offer a number of features all in the same place to help early childhood educators reduce their paperwork, communicate with parents, and comply with regulations. Our features include everything from risk assessments, cleaning sheets, accident forms, parent communication, child observations, and much more. And to say thank you for joining this webinar today, we're offering a 2-month discount on teachcloud.com/discount-2022, or you can email us hello@teachcloud.com to learn more about how we help early childhood educators or to learn more about the software. I would also like to draw your attention to Cloud Academy. So Cloud Academy is also owned by Teach Cloud, and it's an e-learning platform for anybody working with or caring for young children. Cloud Academy has a number of courses on science for preschool, food safety awareness, supporting children that have gone through adverse childhood experiences or trauma, and all the way to diversity and equality. We also offer certificates for anyone who completes our courses. Lastly, then, I'd like to draw your attention to teachcloud.com/webinars. That is where we record and put up all the webinars that we do. So this one will be up within 5 days of recording, but we also have other resources such as incorporating mindfulness into your preschool or trauma-informed care in early childhood education. So now I'm going to introduce Saskia Joss, who is our expert speaker today. So Saskia is there on and is waving. And a lot of times I don't want to introduce our guest speakers because I think it sounds way better coming from them. So I'm going to hand you over to Saskia. And Saskia, can you tell us a bit about the work you do or what led you into your profession?
Yes, so I'm Saskia Joss and I am a child therapist from London. I used to be a primary school teacher, particularly like you guys, I'm sure, an early years educator, specifically working with reception classes in the early years. And what happened was I moved schools, was very, very happy in my job. I love being a reception teacher and I particularly love working in the early years and seeing how quickly the children would learn and change. And I loved it. And then I moved to a school which I loved even more, a really fantastic school that I am still very lucky to work at, but in my class was a very different demographic of children. I had lots and lots of children whose families were using food banks. I had lots of children who were in homes with domestic violence. I had lots of looked after children, and the children in my class were so lovely and so delightful, but they needed more than a 30th of my attention. And I felt that I needed to do something different to try and meet their needs and give them the extra thing that they needed, which was this kind of like emotional loving support that they maybe were or weren't getting from home, or the kind of something to kind of counteract the fear or uncertainty that they had in their own homes. And so I requalified to become a therapist for children, and I'm an art and play therapist. So I mostly work in kind of spending time with children, creating a relationship and helping them to express themselves and feel better about the things that are happening to them, and also just to be another person in their corner who loudly and proudly cares for them and represents them and helps them in all different contexts, school contexts and home contexts. But I now am a therapist for kids, so I try and help kids and families to be supported through difficult times, basically.
Amazing. And I really love that that introduction that, you know, led you into where you are now, and the fact that you work in the early years, because a lot of the people that are listening on this are preschool educators or they own a daycare. So it's nice to have a therapist with an early childhood educational background. So we're really, really excited to have you with us, and just thank you for, you know, giving up your time to offer some advice and suggestions to the early childhood educators on this webinar. So I'm going to start now with that introduction. And it's quite a broad question, but I just wanted you to give us, kind of an overview on what you think emotional regulation is in child development.
Yeah, so emotional regulation in general is the ability to carry on doing what you need to do despite something shocking happening inherently. So, an example in real life for adults is you've got a job interview, you're very nervous, but you manage to hold it together to give your best answers and really show your best skills and show everyone how great you are, even though you feel very overwhelmed. You've got that kind of like pulsating feeling where you're nervous and you're kind of whatever, and you want to make sure you can present your best self. Being able to regulate is the thing that helps us to do that. So in terms of what's actually happening in your brain, your body is producing cortisol, your stress chemical in this case for your interview, but because you are a regulated person who's had experience of staying calm in spite of adversity, your body also makes serotonin, which helps you to calm down enough to continue to present yourself even though you feel nervous. So what we're trying to talk about in terms of children is we're teaching them the skills to stay calm in spite of shock or sadness or anger. We're trying to help them to get back to that calm place to be able to function in a normal way.
And that's so important, Saskia, because look, life happens. So things will
Absolutely.
happen where you might get a bit angry or you might get frustrated, but it's actually how you deal with those emotions, like you said. So
Yeah, and I think also in terms of what you've said on your side, it says emotional self-regulation. And I think one of the interesting things to think about is the idea of who is actually regulating themselves. So when you're an adult, we often think that we're regulating ourselves, but we're actually not. Lots of adults regulate by drinking a quick glass of wine in the evening or going out with a friend who helps them to calm down. What we're really trying to find is ways to calm down that we can do completely with our own bodies by the time we're an adult or an adult person, and all of that starts in childhood.
And I think that's just such a great segue because it really shows why is emotional regulation important. And can you just give us like a small, I know you've kind of answered it, but maybe a sentence on two on why it is important, especially why it's
Yeah.
important to build this up during the early years.
Yeah, so particularly for children, it's really important that we can help them to get back to that calm place, to regulate the emotions that they have that are high, extreme, intense for them quickly, because there are loads of things they actually have to do. So they have to get in the car to go to school. When they get to school, they have to sit on the carpet. They have to not hit their friends if they're playing with them. There are things children have to do. And we need them to be able to calm down enough to do the things they have to do. So in a school setting, there are so many things they have to do. And all of that training to sit at a desk and do your writing, all of that training to play nicely in the playground starts in the early years. We all know that as early years facilitators, we are teaching the children the skills they will use on a daily basis to get through school and then through whatever they're going to do as adults in terms of jobs and also relationships with other people. We're teaching them how to be with other people in a calm and safe way and how to get things done that they need to get done. And we do that very slowly in the early years, which is why we don't force children to go to tables and do all the activities. We're trying to get them to have the impetus to do the things they want to do as they get there. And we think that, and in early years, we're trying to say to children, this is some lovely things you could do. If you sit down for 5 minutes, maybe next time you can sit down for 10 minutes. And all of that is teaching regulation. How do we teach children to fit to the structures that they need to do, despite the fact that they're a big ball of messy feelings and there's loads of stuff they want to do and they want to run around the classroom screaming and they want to wipe the paint on the wall? We're teaching them regulation. Every time they don't do the thing they would most like to do and they actually do something that they need to do, that's a practice for regulation in other situations.
Really great examples there. And, we are saying there, children, they are a ball of emotions. I think everyone is. So if you were talking to like a preschool educator or even a parent
Yeah.
and they ask you, so how do I actually help my child regulate their emotions? What are some tips that you would offer?
Yeah, so we know in terms of children's brains and all people's brains, obviously, because we were all once children, that our brains wire up from the bottom to the top. The bottom is the part of our body that, the bottom of our brain, exactly where your neck connects into your head. That's the part of your body that helps you decide if you're in danger or you're safe. And that's the part that kind of goes off like a fire alarm a lot in young children. And it's this experience of over time being calmed back down again that helps us know how big a reaction we need to make. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect the bottom of our brain that decides whether something is dangerous or not to the top of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is all about thinking and planning. And we're trying to, over time, it takes children about 5 years to connect the part of their brain that wonders if they're in danger to the thinking part that can make a plan. It takes about 5 years for that to be fully wired up. And the things that help us wire children up to be able to think, I don't like this, but I'm going to be able to think of a plan, ask for some help, do all the things I might need to do to get regulated and do the thing I need to do. There are a few things we really need to help children do. And the first thing is be a calm person. Let them copy how calm you are. Why do we need to do that? Because if we are in a situation where we're going, this is very worrying, and the other person goes, actually, we're okay. Look, the doors are shut, nothing, the loud noise has stopped. There's no reason we need to be worried. You can begin to start calming down yourself because you can see that the other person is calm. So the first thing to do if a child is really dysregulated, which is what we say if a child is not being able to regulate, they're dysregulated, they're having too many feelings at once, either one feeling they're very angry or they're nervous and sad, so they're crying and they're dysregulated. What we start by doing is trying to show them that you are calm. So you're calm, so they know there's actually no danger and there's nothing to worry about. The second thing is to name what you can see. And this is called affect naming. So the first thing is to be calm. And the second thing is to name what you can see. Affect naming is a really amazing brain hack. And what it does, when I say to a child, you are really sad, you are having a really tough time, the brain will begin to make chemicals to deal with that feeling and start to create serotonin or start to create dopamine or oxytocin because of the connection, which will begin to calm the cortisol or the other feelings that the child is having. So when we affect name, when we say to a child what feeling they are having, their brain will begin to start making the antidote chemicals and help them to calm down. It also teaches children emotional vocabulary, which is really important. A child who's going like this, is very different to a child who says, I'm really sad, because once you know how they feel, you can start to work on making them feel better. So affect, we start by being calm, then we name their affect, we say what feeling we think they're having, and then we help them to learn an emotional vocabulary. And then over time, this experience of being seen upset, told how upset you are, understanding what vocabulary you need to explain that, and then seeing how over time that child will calm down will help them to feel better. A really good example of this, and it's one that nursery schools and reception classes and everyone does incredibly well, is getting children in for their first few days of school. They come in, they're totally overwhelmed. We have a plan. The nurseries have always got these amazing plans. They've got a key worker that collects the child. They take them to another person. They take them to the best table, whatever it is. You've got these amazing plans for how to help these children calm down from their dysregulation and get into the experience of going to nursery for the first time. And what we're doing in that situation is we're showing them, I'm calm, I know what's wrong with you, I'm telling you what's wrong with you, and I've got a plan. And then I'm going to help you every day that you come to know that this plan is the same. And what we do when we show children the same thing over and over again, which we're extremely good at in certain nursery situations and less good at in other nursery situations, is we show them that they have capacity to be regulated. The same thing will happen when you do this, so there's nothing to worry about. When you come in nervous, I'll bring you straight to Laura, your beautiful, fabulous key worker. She'll take you over to Mike. He always does the painting. He's fantastic. And then we're all going to have a snack together. That's the plan. And the child will know after 3 or 4 days or a few weeks that that's the plan. There's nothing to worry about. It's always the same, and they can begin to calm down. And that's regulation. It's this experience of feeling the same thing again, but being regulated by another person to calm down enough that the next time it happens, you feel it less strongly. And that's really what we're doing with little children. We're teaching them over time with consistency and calm that things will be okay. And that's how they learn to regulate.
I think you gave really, practical points there and literally in steps. So thank you so much for that. I think one of the key points I took away, and I know everyone will take away different things, was consistency. So sometimes we just want it to be right now and to be fixed right now, but actually it takes time, it takes understanding, and it takes learning about yourself, what triggers you, and also about the child. So really great points there, Saskia.
And it's also a particular part of the brain. So there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus, and it does quite a lot of things. One thing it does is dreams, but the other thing that it does is it stores similar memories in the same place. So for example, let's say you and we're out having a cup of coffee. It's not COVID, we're not nervous, we're having a great time, we're really relaxed, we're having a cup of coffee, and a really loud noise happens. Because we're adults and we've heard lots of loud noises, our hippocampus will check that loud noise against other noises we've heard. And if we've heard noises of that before and we know it's not dangerous, it's nothing scary, you and I will stop for a second having our coffee. Our brains will compute that experience and we'll both carry on as if nothing has happened. If you're a child and you haven't heard that same bang lots and lots of times, your hippocampus hasn't got lots of experiences to compare it against. And it's that experience, that list of similar experiences, and that they turned out okay, that help us to regulate over time. So that's what we're showing these children. When you get upset, I don't get overwhelmed. I help you calm down and everything is fine. It's really great to do it once, but it's amazing to do it 100 times. Because if you've done that 100 times, a child will know their feelings aren't too much. The adults can handle it. There's always a plan in place to help them get calm again. And then they can copy what you've done for the rest of their life and stay calm in situations that are overwhelming.
Yeah, really, really fantastic points there. And just to move on as well to, I know it takes time and there's certain steps that we can take, but on your website, I know you incorporate art and playful learning experiences, which is really what drew me to you. And I knew you'd be an excellent speaker and I wasn't wrong. But when we're talking about healthy expression, how can educators and parents use art or playful learning experiences to support young children in expressing themselves?
Yeah, I think there are lots and lots of ways that you can do this. I think just having a home where you have access to art in the same way that they do in earlier settings, there's always art available in earlier settings. And it's this one, I think the big things that people say now, and I know that it's kind of maybe more common than it used to be, is this thing that children shouldn't be making one thing. Not every child should go home with the exact same little butterfly that looks exactly the same. This ability to create something amazing and be proud of what you've made is the cornerstone of self-esteem. And this thing that, what I make is special, what when I make it, people are pleased for me. All of that is a very, very core part of becoming a human that creates without fear. And that's really, really important for the rest of our lives. People wouldn't make such kind of interesting discoveries like the lovely program that you've made, Teach Cloud, is so helpful, but you do it from a place of being able to be brave about making something new that other people don't have. And that's part of this kind of healthy expression thing, that when I make something, I express something, people commend me, people are pleased with me. And the other thing in this case is about talking about feelings. There are so many amazing books now about helping children understand feelings as colors, feelings as animals, feelings as this, feelings as that. And all of it can help children to be able to be more expressive in the way that they make things and play. And I think the other thing I'd be thinking about when playing with my kids is, what's the thematic thing that's coming up? So for example, you might be playing with your child and they're playing in the school context. You're playing with your key child, and they're playing in the kitchen. And every time they bring you over the food is burnt. Gosh, that's so weird. Why is the food burnt? That's such a weird game. Why are they doing that? And what they might be doing, in fact, is expressing that they feel frustrated, that they keep trying things and the outcome doesn't work. Instead of when they put the food in the oven, they make this beautiful be our guest style meal where everything's perfect. What they're showing you is that in a lot of, maybe they're obviously I don't know that child, but this is an imaginary child that doesn't exist, but maybe the thematic nature of their play will express to you kind of a theme of their life, that they feel frustrated, that they don't get this kind of like big moment where they are able to achieve, and they're actually showing that in their play. Or in every time they play a game with other children, they don't take a starring role. Or maybe in their own family, there isn't this opportunity to be the star. How do we help children move their play from these kind of stagnant thematic things to an ability to kind of be creative without feeling like they're going to get it wrong? And all of that comes through healthy expression and giving children lots of different methods to paint, methods to play, different ways to create, and also just being really proud of them, whatever they are doing. And that's at home, at school. And I think there's also this element of finding ways to praise children that aren't about yourself. In that I'm so proud of you is really great, but you should be so proud of yourself. You've made something really incredible. You worked really hard on that. You made a lot of effort that I haven't seen someone of your age make before. The way that you came back and tried again was really impressive. All of those things help children to see that it's not about the final product, it's about the way that they did something and the energy that they put in. And all of that is very helpful to making kind of children who are going to make brave and fantastic things as they grow.
I love that. And, also in today's society, being brave and being able to take risks is so important. They're talking about in the next 20 years, many of the jobs we have now won't be there, so just being able to deal with different situations and the outcome is so important. And if you can regulate your emotions, you'll rule the world. But really great points there. And I think the other thing I picked up from that, Saskia, especially for early childhood educators, is that observation as well. So actually observing what are their interests, how are they playing, why are they playing in certain ways, is so important. And obviously for parents, they're with their children every day. So, really talking to the child to try and understand the play. I think the example with I did not know that's where you were going with that, with the burnt food, but it actually makes sense. And of course, not every time we see burnt food, we're going to think, oh, they're frustrated. But, just as an example that if you're actually in tune, and you're kind of asking, why are they always doing this? Or, how can we make this better? Or what are the themes in their play? You'll start to get those answers. So really great points there.
And I think also if there are children in your group that you're genuinely worried about, for example, they've had a bereavement, that they've got a new sibling and they're struggling with that, that their parents have just got divorced, or they were living with their grandparents, now they're back with their parents. I feel like there'll be some children things about. And that's where you can be a bit of like a secret therapist in terms of not trying to do or push or change children, but watching their play. Has their play changed? Are they less brave in the way that they play? Are they louder in the way that they play? Do they engage other children, or are they playing more by themselves? All of those things will help you to see if they're managing the new situation that you've heard about, or their experiences that you can see a lot of that through their play. Instead of, because they're very little, you can't go up to them and be like, so are you really sad that your grandma died? That's too much for a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old. It's just too much. But watching the way that they play, are they more withdrawn? Are they playing more with other children? Are they looking to play very tactile games because they're missing being touched at home because their mummy's got a new baby? There are lots of things you can watch. If you know about a child, you can see if any of those things are coming out in their play. And as they change, you can see whether things are getting better or worse. So it's not about kind of diagnosing children. It's about, if you know something about them, you can watch out for signs for those things in their play. They've got a new baby. Are they now playing with all the babies more often? In which case you think, wow, that child's really managing having a new baby. Or if they take the baby dolls and throw them down the slide, you might be thinking that child might be struggling with having a new baby. But we're not trying to diagnose children. We're just trying to track if there's any change in their play, because it's an indication of a change in their inner world as well.
Yeah, I think that another great point. And I think on Teach Cloud with the app, we really made sure that parent communication, but also the observations were really important, that they can actually see patterns within the play. Because when you're documenting and using an app or a paper-based, but from Teach Cloud's perspective, it will analyze, the kind of observations you're doing, give you some recommendations for preschool activities and learning opportunities. But even moving on from, observation, how do we actually organize the early years environment? And maybe you might have some tips as well from the home environment that would help to promote emotional regulation.
Definitely. So I think it would be, if you think about different kinds of children and what they might need, obviously it will be helpful to some children if there are parts of your classroom that are quieter than others. Obviously, there are young children in that room. There are probably lots of young children in that room. They're going to be making a lot of noise. Are there any places in your space that can be kind of separated out, that could be a tent where the zip can shut, that where a child could sit down with headphones on and listen to calm music? Are there places where you could help a child to regulate because they've got the space to calm down? Are there, are the walls in your classroom covered in lots and lots of bright things? Could you tone back the decorations in your class? Is the environment overstimulating for children? And I think it's this kind of thing about, when children get upset, they can do these things. Some classes now have boxes of toys that are specifically good for emotional regulation, like sound toys or toys that smell, or, pop-its, or those silly things, whatever. But all those sorts of things that a child, if they don't feel good, you can say to a child, I can see you're really having a tough day. You've been getting really upset every time you play. It's obviously a bit much for you. How about we go to the calm corner? In the calm corner, I've got these lovely blankets, I've got lovely cushions, and I've got lovely music. Would you like to come and listen with me? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to give children the ability to create positive coping mechanisms, and the idea that if we don't feel good, we don't have to stay like that. I think that's something that adults can really think about as well. You might be having a really bad week. Well, what could you do to stop your bad week? What could you do to stop your bad? You've woken up on the wrong side of bed. You've had a really awful day. You just broke up with your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You're not doing well. What can you do to shake yourself out of a rut? And that's kind of trying to build positive coping mechanisms rather than negative ones. So if you think about yourself, some of the coping mechanisms you have, I'm sure, are extremely positive. You might think, well, when I'm really upset, I always call my friend Julie, and she's so helpful because she's always got loads of space for me and she's so kind about it and really, really great. That's a really positive coping mechanism. It doesn't require anything negative. It doesn't mean you have to do anything you shouldn't do. It's not illegal. It's really a great thing to do. It's a really good way to cope. You're getting oxytocin from connecting with a friend. You get dopamine from having something exciting to do. It's a really good coping mechanism. If your coping mechanism is eating 5 bars of chocolate, that's probably not the best coping mechanism. It's not a terrible coping mechanism, particularly if you don't do it all the time. But if you can find ways to cope and regulate that don't require external physical input from particularly objects, you get yourself in a healthier position, which means you don't need something to calm down. So if you were saying, I'm having a terrible day, the only thing that will help is if I get home and I can have a glass of wine, that's not a particularly healthy coping mechanism, because you've got to then spend 7 hours waiting for that moment. If you can try and teach children early on that there are actual coping mechanisms we can do that can help us, however stressed we are, without having to have an input from anything else, like breathing, like tapping, like meditating, like running around, like yoga, lots of kind of physical activities help us to calm down without needing anything extra, no objects. And that's the thing, we want to be able to, if in a bad situation, calm down wherever we are without objects. And that's what we're trying to teach children, although we can do that by starting with very healthy objects like poppets and whatever. They're not bad for children to play with, they're fine. And in doing that, you're saying when you feel bad, you can go and get something that can help you to calm down, teaching positive coping mechanisms. And none of those things are, could be something different every time, which shows us that it doesn't have to be one thing. We don't have to be latched on to a particular type of coping mechanism, and we can choose healthy coping mechanisms when we notice that we're not doing well. And that's a very good thing to know. You don't have to stay sad. Yes, it's okay not to be okay, but you also don't have to stay sad. You don't have to be upset all the time. You don't have to be worried all the time. There are lots of things we can do. And I think that although it's really important to know, however you feel, that's okay, you also don't have to stay stuck there. And that's really important to know, whatever age you are. You can be 5 or 50, you don't have to be sad all the time, and people can help you and you can help yourself. And there are things that can be done. And it's really important to know that when you're little. All feelings are valid, but you don't have to be stuck in the more difficult ones for a very long time. You can always get help. And that's part of the process of teaching children. If you're sad, I can see you're sad. You might need something. What can we find? And that's the same process of trying to help yourself when you get stuck too.
I think as well, giving the children those tips, those tools, that when they actually are sad, they can, pick from one and say, I think this will help me. Because sometimes as we get older, we don't even have those tools. We don't actually know what to do, so maybe the only thing we do have is that glass of wine, or, is something that is not actually beneficial. Things like mindfulness are now really coming to the forefront. Absolutely. And other types of mechanisms that we can use. But as educators, starting again within the early years to give them all those tools. So as they get older, they have so many things that they can draw from. Just amazing points again, Saskia.
And also it can help you to think again. I usually have a glass of wine. I've just seen one of my children has just on one day had a really good time with a rain stick. That really calmed them down. And the next day they went and sat with their best friend. Well, that means that I could also have other mechanisms. What else can I put into my life to help me regulate, be calmer, be happier, and feel like I don't have to rely on something that probably isn't that good for me? It's an opportunity when you see children do it and they're so malleable to try these different things and they do work for them. You think, gosh, that's so weird. When I was younger, I used to bake and that was really great. Or I used to listen to good music, or I used to go out dancing. Like, what can I do now that will help me to feel happier more of the time? And I think we can just, in general, try and help people to feel that, and that it's okay to ask for help if you're not sure how to do that.
Yeah. I think this will also be helping a lot of adults on this webinar as well, because, a lot of these tools we can apply to ourselves, but, when we're talking about early childhood educators, they're working as a counselor, they're working with parents, sometimes they're cooking, sometimes they're serving the food. There's so many different roles that they take on. So if it ever does get to a point where maybe the early childhood educator is saying, actually, I'm not really sure I can actually support this child, maybe we need to refer. What are some general signs that a child may need further support or therapy?
So I would say the big thing is children stand out when they need more support. They stand out. There are things that are very normal, like we talked about with children transitioning into coming into school by themselves, or their parent, particularly with COVID, when the parents had to wait outside. That was sometimes really hard for children. They didn't have a parent to kind of like put their stuff in their bags and put their stuff on the pegs and whatever. And for some children, it is really hard. They sometimes even cry for the whole first few days. They don't even stop half an hour after the parents drop them off. They really cry and cry and cry. That's completely normal. Obviously, it's a shame that there are children whose attachment and process is very wobbly, which means that when their parent leaves, they don't just calm down knowing their parent will come back. But exactly as we said, with regulation and with time and with the fun and consistency of their setting, those children will work out that they're okay. And a few weeks later, those children will calm down. It might take half an hour, then 20 minutes, then 15 minutes. They will calm down. It's the children that don't calm down. It's the children that, even though they've been there for months and months and they should be very happy in the setting, there are things that you notice. They cry a lot, they're very anxious, they hurt children all the time, even though you think they understand that they shouldn't. They say things about their home lives that you think are worrying. It's things like that where they noticeably stand out from other children over an extended period of time. It could be a developmental period. We know that children, particularly boys, obviously, get their first boost of testosterone while they are in early years, and they might then start punching people for a few weeks, and you think, oh gosh, this is not what we're looking for. But if it calms down again, then they don't need therapy. They don't need therapy. It's I think it would be, in most general situations, a kind of mixture of two things. One, a consistent behavioral situation that means they stand out, as well as probably information that you know about their private life. It's kind of like two things where you think we know that they're not having a good time at home, and their behavior at school is clearly showing that as well. Over a few weeks, if it's a week and you think they've really had a bad week, wait till the next week and see if they come back and they don't behave like that. Also, you can ask the parent, are you having issues with sleep? Are you having issues with diet? Have they been unwell? Because obviously those things, particularly with young children, cause massive fluctuations in behavior that aren't necessarily an indication at all that a child would need therapy. They just need time to get over a bug, or they need time to move into their new house, or they need to, whatever it is. There are lots of reasons why children's behavior will be up or down, and then will even out. So I think it's about this kind of understanding that there's something going on that you've heard about, or you feel, if you're noticing that children are saying things or doing things that make you feel nervous, all the things that you've learned about in child protection, any of those things that come up, you might think, well, I have a feeling this is going on, and this behavior is showing me that. And then when I speak to the mother, blah, whatever, or the father, there are lots of reasons, but I think it's this kind of this two-pronged thing. The behavior is irregular for an extended time, and you have a feeling, or from factual information, that there's something going on that's not right in their family setting. Or they've been through something horrible or scary, and then there are lots of things that can do. Either you would refer them, or even you don't necessarily have to refer young children for therapy, particularly children with low speech. It's very, very hard for them to have therapy. What you can do is you can call someone like me, and you can say, we've got this child in our class. They keep coming in and they keep hurting other children. It's really worrying us. What do you suggest that we do? They don't necessarily need therapy, but they might need an outside eye to look at your situation and give you ideas. I'm always happy to help schools with putting things in place for specific children without needing to, provide actual therapy for those children, particularly for very little children, 2 and 3 year olds, probably mostly too young to have actual formal, even art and play therapy. It's probably too much extended time for them. But I'm always happy to talk about specific kids, think about plans for those children, track those children, and see if they need a different plan without having actual therapy for those children because they're very little. As someone's, how can we reach you? You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on my, you've got my email address, I think, as well. You can always just send me a message, and I'll see what I can do. If I can find time for you, if I can find time to speak to your school, we can put something in place for your kids. But I'd be also thinking about, if you've got a child that's really struggling, the main thing that I would be thinking is, which part of their life doesn't feel safe for them, and how do we make them feel safer? Whatever's going on, how do I make them feel safer? So you can't fix what's going on at their house. You can't stop their parent from doing X or Y, but what you can do is, while they're at school, they can have an adult that's always looking after them, that they know where that person is all the time, that they even at playtime, that adult's really close by, that there's someone looking after them, that they feel looked after. And if you think about yourself, what are the things that make you feel unsafe? Well, sometimes it's not knowing what the plan is, not knowing what's going to happen next. Sometimes it's this thing, it's on the slides, I'm sure you can find it in a second, but it's this, I think there's this thing about what would make that child feel safer, and that you can't fix it at home, but you can make your setting extremely safe. Can they be in smaller groups with other children more of the time? Can they have separate time where they're away from other children? Are there things that could happen where they really just get time with their key workers so they can really bond with them and feel like they're really being looked after? They're not being looked after in the way that you think they should at home, or something's made them feel dysregulated. There are ways to think about, I would really be thinking about, how do I make that child feel safe? And once that child feels safer, generally their behavior is much less erratic. I'd also be asking them, what can I change for you? You know, what can I change? You do like going out in the playground? No, it's too loud. Okay, well, when everyone goes out, you can stay inside. And at least for a little bit. I'm not suggesting that they never ever go outside ever again, but this kind of thing about how do I, as a therapist, there are things that I do where I can't fix things. For example, if somebody's grandma or grandfather or cousin has died, I obviously can't bring them back from the dead. There's nothing I can do about that. It's very sad. What I'm doing in that case is I'm sitting with the child in their grief. I'm being with them while they feel horrible things, and I'm not embarrassed by the fact that they feel those bad things. But there's sometimes things I can do. If I'm working with a child and they say, I really don't like my maths group, it's terrible, my teacher's not nice to me, I will go to the school and I'll say, please come and move their maths group. There are some things that can be done. So I would try and think, are there any small fixes that you can make in your classroom? And then I'd be thinking about the feeling of emotional safety for those children. How do I make them feel safer here, that they can calm down enough to behave properly? How can we give them the regulation by making them feel safe enough? And I think that lots of children don't need therapy. They just need to feel safer where they are. And most of that isn't because of what you're doing in your setting. It's what they're doing at home. But we can bring that safety to them in the earlier setting, 100%.
Very great points there. And I think especially on safety and just soothing the child, and also accepting what the things that you can't change, so within the preschool environment, what can you do within that environment for that child? And just moving on to our next question. So during a stressful event, what questions can we ask or phrases can we say to support the child?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things. So the first thing is I'd be trying to think about the way that I'm phrasing my questions. As an adult, you might find this as well. If somebody says to you, why were you there? That's already makes you feel like you've done something wrong. The word why at the beginning of a question makes us feel like there's a wrong or right answer, that there's an element of judgment, there's a possibility to be judged. If you're already freaking out, you're already having a terrible time, and then someone asks you a why question, it makes you feel even more wrong. So why are you crying is not a helpful question, because it makes the child feel like crying itself is the wrong thing to do. And actually, they're probably crying for quite a good reason. So what's happened that's made you cry? I can see that you're sad. What's going on? Can I help you? How can I make you feel better? Would you like to come with me somewhere else? So we're trying to really avoid why. Why makes everybody feel judged immediately, even if it's you think you're asking a very simple question, why were you over there? Well, why were you over there implies that you shouldn't have been over there. Even if you've got a really great reason, the why makes people feel like they're doing the wrong thing. So any question you're asking when a child is very stressed, we're trying to think, how do we make it seem like when there is no wrong answer, because they already feel like that something is wrong. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring them from a place of no. Usually with young children, it's no, I'm not going there, I'm not doing this. We're trying to bring them from a no to a yes. So we're trying to offer options that we can do. So we're not saying, shall we go and get a hot air balloon? We haven't got one, so let's not do that. But should we go and see if we've got nice books in the book corner? We're trying to think, but inherently we're trying to connect the bottom part of their brain where they're very anxious, nervous and worried to the top part, which does thinking. Loads of ways to do that. So for example, do you think we should go to the book corner first, or do you think we should go to wash our hands first? That stimulates the prefrontal cortex, which begins to make chemicals that help us to calm down. So the prefrontal cortex is the calmest part of our brain. It's the bit that you use. If I said to you like, oh, we're going out for dinner tonight, should we go to the cinema first or go for dinner first? You'd be using your prefrontal cortex, which requires no emotions at all. I mean, if you were worried that you'll be late, you might be kind of a bit in the middle of both. But when we have to plan something, we use our prefrontal cortex, and it kind of takes us away from the kind of nervous part of our brain. So we're trying to give them kind of planning questions or imagination questions, or what do you think would happen if a dinosaur just walked in here right now? You think we're moving the child away. Well, we're not really doing that. We're trying to show the child's brain it's okay to calm down. And later you can say to them, gosh, you really had a hard time today. I saw that you were really upset at lunchtime. Because when they're very stressed, they can't think things through with their prefrontal cortex. where you could have a chat about what was it like and what happened when Billy hit you with a stick. It's not going to be a good conversation when they're very, very stressed. So we're trying to help them calm down enough that they can reconnect to the whole of their brain, the thinking part, the feeling part, and the danger part that checks if we're in danger. We're trying to move them from the part where they feel dangerous to where they can have some feelings and then they can do some thinking. And all we do with that is trying to be calm and offer different kinds of thinking patterns to help the children to calm down properly.
And we're getting some questions there on if the webinar will be recorded, because you're giving such great points. I'm sure people will want to watch this back. So we will have a recording. We will have a recording on teachcloud.com/webinars within 5 days of this date. So within 5 days, essentially, of the recording. So you'll be able to watch that back or share it with any colleagues. And I just wanted to pick up as well, I think, Saskia, you might regret inviting people to contact you via Instagram, because I think a lot of people are going to be contacting you to ask you specific questions about their school or early childhood.
I'll see what I can do. If I can fit you in, I will always fit you in. If I can't fit you in, I will let you know. I would also recommend that you find a therapist near you that you can trust, you know, and also, for example, for a small kind of consultation fee rather than a weekly fee, your school can have a meeting with a therapist who they talk to about behavioral issues as often as they want to, you know, for much, much less money than an actual weekly session for 10 children, for example. You know, if you can find a therapist near your school who you trust, if you know someone who was a teacher and is now a therapist, that sort of thing, you can find someone near you who knows your school, knows your demographic, understands what kind of behavioral issues generally come up in your school, and is kind of ready to support you. I offer in my school this. I work in 2 schools. I offer in my school this kind of service where teachers can just contact me if they're having problems with particular children. I come in, I observe the child, I see what they're doing, and I make a plan for that particular child. It doesn't take me very long. And I think if you were to meet a therapist that you could work with near you, they could do the same thing. Obviously, I can't come to your school in Limerick because I don't usually live here. I live in London, although at the moment I am in Cork at the moment, but I'm not usually here. But I'm sure if you could find a therapist near you who does similar things to me, they'd love the opportunity out of working hours to come in and have a chat with your school, to help you be supported, to think of ways to support your young children, to watch the play of your kids and see what's going on for you without those children having to have extended therapy, and also without your school having to lay out a huge amount of money. Every school is struggling with money. I try my best to find ways that I can help schools quickly and effectively for the least money that I can, you know, use for my own time. And I think there are lots of therapists who be doing the same. So if you don't live near me, so it's harder for me to support you or help you, you can always find someone near you who can probably do the same sort of thing. Come in, consult, and give you a plan, rather than trying to find a huge amount of money in the budget for one child to have therapy. There's lots of ways to do it that are much, much cheaper. So I would recommend finding someone near you who can come in and just have a look and kind of help you with your setting and make it more emotionally supportive, and look at specific children's behavior that you're worried about without having to kind of invest a huge amount in therapy if your school can't afford it. There are ways to do it.
Right. And if you are looking at those ways, maybe you don't want to maybe get a therapist. Maybe there's just ways that you're just looking for tips to identify what are children's triggers, so that maybe you can remove those triggers, or that you can be ready for them or help them cope with them. What kind of tips would you give on that?
I think I'd be thinking about this kind of thing about, you know, when we identify triggers in children, what we're really saying is this child is struggling in general, and there are certain things that make them notice that they're struggling more. And your ideas are excellent. Observe and investigate, have this kind of opinion of what the children should be doing, and kind of check them against other things. Are there patterns, are there things? But I think in general, I'd be thinking, what's going on for this child? What is going on for this child that, you know, every time we leave the room, it's just too much for them? Is it that they should have more time in the room? Is it that they need to be warned in advance that we're going from the, you know, the nursery classroom to the playground? Is it that they need to be warned that someone else is coming in to do an activity in the afternoon? It's in a lot of these situations, I think it's about safety. What is making that child feel unsafe when these things happen? The nursery teacher is off on a Friday, that child's behavior is always terrible on a Friday. Well, that's a really obvious pattern. They've got a connection to that person. When that person isn't there, it makes them feel worried. How can you kind of bloom the relationship they have with another adult that will be there on a Friday, so that it's less of a big deal when that person leaves. You know, could that person who is out on a Friday do a bit of practicing where they leave the classroom for half an hour here or there to do the photocopying for everyone else, so that that person's got a chance to be with the child that's most connected to them and give these opportunities. You know, the other thing always about transitions, if it's based on transitions, it's this idea of warning children of transitions. You know, we usually have in nursery classrooms those visual timetables, but some children don't look at them and are still shocked. So we have to go through them. We're at this part of the day. The next thing that's going to happen is this. And also, when we go to the other room, why don't you hold hands with Jane? Jane's so lovely. Jane would love to take you over to the hall when we go and do PE. That'd be so nice. Whatever it is that you're doing, we kind of have to warn children more, obviously. It's this moment of lack of safety that children are kind of suddenly dysregulated because they feel unsafe. If we're kind of imagining these children as kind of, I always think where the way that the brain wires up is a bit like an old-fashioned switchboard, you know, like in films, like "hello operator," and they put the thing in the hole. Sometimes when they move the connection, you know, for example, when you give a child a green cup, and then most days that's absolutely fine. It's a green cup connects to, that's fine. A green cup connects, that's fine. And then one day you give them a green cup, that's terrible, it's the worst thing that's happened. It's because as the brain wires up, sometimes it makes a mistake about which part of the brain activates when things happen. So yeah, it's true that children will have triggers, but there's also some days where anything is a trigger. And I'd be thinking, does this child feel generally safe? Are they able to know that they're being looked after and that the adults are in charge? I'd even say that out loud to some children. Don't worry, Steve. You know, Jenny's in charge here today. Jenny's made all the plans for the room. She's a really fantastic teacher. She's been working at this school for 5 years. Isn't she wonderful? She's made all the activities. She knows where all the children are. Isn't Jenny great at managing this room? She's so clever. I love working with Jenny. I would say that to a child who seems dysregulated, generally the kind of anxious kids, because they need to know that there are people in charge. And you can say those things out loud. I think sometimes we think like, gosh, that child really feels worried about stuff. I'd be then thinking, well, what can I do that would make them less worried? How do I instigate this feeling of there's a box and you're safe inside it and we're managing you? Jenny's managing the room, I'm managed by Jenny, and I manage you. And that means we all know what's going on in the room, and we're all looking after you. You don't have to worry because we're all looking after you. Sometimes we have to say it out loud to some children.
Yeah, and I think what comes there is that communication piece, actually talking to the child, you know. Yeah.
Not all children need it. I think the big thing is some children's regulation factors are easier. They're better at regulating. Their parents are more consistent at home. They thrive in the very consistent environment of their nursery. There's nothing to worry about. And sometimes it's children who've had trauma, and sometimes it isn't. You know, sometimes just the whole experience is a bit overwhelming. They come from a very quiet house with quiet parents. The nursery is very loud. They come from a home where there's not very many activities. They mostly sit there watching telly. When they come to school, there's so much to do, it's a bit overwhelming. None of that's a bad thing. It's not an indication of anything wrong or a home where they're not doing the right things. It's just different. So we're trying to say to them, you can manage in this different place. These are the things we do here. It's always like this. You'll get used to it and it will be fine. And I'm managing you while you're here with me.
And yeah, I think we've kind of looked at those practical steps already. So really what I wanted to talk about, because we always get, we do, you know, we've done webinars on behavior and we always get questions on specifically toddlers because they're much younger, deal with anger and fear. So what would you say are the best strategies for that?
So with anger, I've got like two, yes, let's do this. Yes. So with anger, we say to children, it's okay that you're angry, but I can't let you hurt something, hurt someone, or break something. So you're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to stand there and stomp. And you're also, and if you're the adult, the thing says, you're really angry. You're really annoyed that they took your toy and you really wanted it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take these teddies and I'm going to throw them in this box. So you're trying to find a way to redirect the energy you get when you're angry, the adrenaline that pumps up. So adrenaline, the actual chemical that we get when we're kind of nervous or angry, the one that makes us go like, ugh, that one, it has to be worked out of the body. You can't, it doesn't just dissipate. Other chemicals like cortisol, you can drink water and they'll just disappear. Adrenaline, when we have it and we're kind of pumped up, you have to work it out of the body. You have to jump up and down. You have to shake it out. You have to run back and forth. If you've got a child who's very angry, they want to punch something, don't let them punch someone. Don't let them punch something, but help them to get the actual chemicals out by moving them around, get them moving. Come outside. We're going to do a race. You're really angry. Oh, you've got all that energy in you. Let's jump around. Let's get it out. We're trying to actually get the chemicals out. It doesn't take very long. It's a short burst of adrenaline that they've got, and you can get it out with a short burst of energy, of an actual energetic activity. You can also find a way to actually be angry. Let's punch a pillow. I'm really angry they took your toy. That toy was really great. We're going to play with it later, but right now we're really annoyed. So what we're trying to do is we're saying it's okay to be angry. All feelings are okay. When you're angry, I'm okay with it. It doesn't stress me out. I don't feel worried about it. I'm not worried about you, but we're going to try and get through this anger by doing something practical. We're going to get the adrenaline out from being angry by moving around in a safe way that also gets rid of our anger. And with fear, the big thing is if there's something that a child is scared of that isn't real, we don't go along with it. The boogeyman, we're not doing that. If it's something real that we're scared of, we empathize. Gosh, it really was scary when that door slammed and it made a really loud noise. I wasn't ready for it. You weren't ready for it. Oh, it was really scary, but now the door's shut. I'm not worried it's going to do that again. I feel much better. How about you? You're still a bit scared? Oh, I'm sorry that you're so scared. It's really tough when it makes that loud noise and you weren't expecting it. If it's a real thing, we empathize. If it's not a real thing, we immediately say it's not real and we don't give it the airtime. The longer we say like, oh yeah, we're going to get the monster spray and all, we're not doing that. We're going to try and, like with real feelings, when we're an adult, a lot of the anxieties we have are real. They're actual things we could be worried about. What should we do? Practical things. If, as they say to adults, if it's something you can't do anything about, try and take it off your list of things to worry about. And it's quite similar with this thing with children and fears. If it's a real fear, an actual thing you can be scared of that really exists, empathy. If it's not real, if it doesn't exist, there isn't a dinosaur, there isn't a monster, there isn't whatever, we tell the child that isn't real. That's not what happened. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put that in the bin because it's really not real. I think it scared you, but I'm going to tell you, you just don't need to be scared because that's not a real thing. If it were real, I would tell you it's not real. We don't have to be scared of that because it's not real. It doesn't exist. And I'm going to put it in the bin because I don't believe in that. So we're trying to get rid of things we don't have to feel fearful of immediately. And anything we do, we give a lot of empathy and space to how difficult it was and how scary it was.
Yeah, really great point. And I think as well, not kind of going along with stuff that isn't real. A lot of times, I've heard that, the monster spray and things like that, just being honest, and yeah, giving them those.
I don't think it's wrong to do it. And some children need it for sure. But I think if you can stop it very early, rather than if it's something that isn't real, stopping it really early just by saying that just isn't real. Mummy has to tell you, or, nursery worker, Dave will tell you that's not real. Adults will tell you right now that's not real. So you don't have to worry about it because it's not real. That's great. If you've got a child that's really gone into it, they're having bad dreams, you might need monster spray. But we're talking early on, just get rid of it. If it's not real, try and get rid of it as quickly as possible and tell the parent to do the same. Tell your parent at home that when they come, he's had this thing today where he was really nervous of dinosaurs. Tell the mum, we're not pretending dinosaurs exist. We're not doing dinosaur spray. We're just saying there are no dinosaurs now. They used to exist, but there aren't any anymore. There's nothing to worry about. There won't be one at our house. Really clear about things we don't need to be fearful of, and things we do need to be fearful of. Loads of empathy. It is really scary. You really don't like that. It's made you feel really worried. What can I do to help you feel less worried? Would you like me to sit next to you? That sort of thing.
Great. And the other thing then, I guess we're kind of feeding into maybe what to do, what not to do, some suggestions, but how do we avoid reinforcing behaviors that concern, behaviors that we don't want?
This is a really tough one because, the idea that you will ignore certain things and not ignore certain things is really tough. I think it really depends on what the behavior is. If it's something that children really can't do, like hurting each other, you just have to say it. You can't ignore the fact that they've hit someone in the face. There are certain things we just have to say no. I think there are some things where if it's not such a big deal, you can kind of once or twice just not notice it as much, because we don't want to constantly be telling children, no, don't do that, no, don't do that, don't do this, no, don't do that, because that makes them feel really frustrated. I think there's a very clear way to do it, which is setting very obvious expectations. If there's something in your nursery that seems to be a big problem, like I think I worked in a school where all the boys for some reason were flushing things down the toilet that they shouldn't flush down the toilet, right? And obviously that's a really silly thing to do. Is it terrible? Is it dangerous? Probably not, but it's probably not a great thing to do. I think there's there are things we can just be very clear about. I don't want to see anybody taking anything into the toilet that doesn't go to the toilet. We're not reinforcing behavior. We're not making a big fuss about it. We're just making it very clear what our line is about things. If I see anybody going into the toilet with something, anytime they need to go to the loo, an adult will have to walk in with them. Obviously, they go in the loo by themselves. We always go in the loo by themselves, but I will have to make sure that no one's carrying anything in. You know, you just have to, if there's something going on that's not right, remind the children a lot. You know, like I think other things that are really important is pleases and thank yous, being polite and saying hello to adults. We remind children, we set our behavior expectation. When someone comes into our classroom, we all turn around and we say hello. That's polite. We remind our children how to engage, and if they're doing things that we don't like, we just keep enforcing it very calm. We don't get annoyed. We just say we don't do that here. These are the rules in this classroom. In this classroom, we make sure that we blah and we don't blah. And then the other big thing is to try and say what you want rather than what you don't want. So instead of don't hit him, you would say, keep your hands to yourself. Because if I say to you, don't think about a green elephant, you're all going to think about a green elephant. If I say to you, think about a lovely purple reindeer, you'll think about that rather than the thing I don't want you to do. So try, and it's hard and it really takes time to get good at not saying the thing you don't want, but practice saying the thing you do want. Keep your hands to yourself. Lovely, lovely, calm hands. Everyone's keeping their hands out of off the walls. Put your hands on your arms so you don't touch the walls. Whatever it is, you have to train yourself to say the positive thing that you do want rather than the negative. Don't do this. It's really hard when you're little. It's the first thing that comes into your head to do. So instead of don't run in the road, you say, come and stand next to the fence with me. So we're not trying to give the picture of what we don't want. We try and put into their brain the thing we really do want. Everyone sitting nicely, nobody stand up. That's not helpful. Everyone stay sitting down, and everyone's gonna sit down. So it's trying to change the way that you actually give commands, that they're the positive thing that you do want rather than don't do that, because that's much harder to copy when you're very little.
Yeah, definitely. And we talked a little bit about adverse childhood experiences, but can you just explain to us why do these kind of childhood life experiences matter in learning self-regulatory skills?
So the actual study about adverse childhood experiences is kind of different to this. The big thing is what they did was they assessed hundreds of thousands of adults in America about the experiences they had had in childhood. And what they found was, and there are a very specific set of adverse childhood experiences that include obviously abuse, sexual abuse, divorce, being moved around a lot as a child. There are lots of them. I think there's 10, and they're very specific. And it's a sad thing to say, but it's kind of the facts that they found out from this particular study was that people who had experienced more than, I think, 7 of the 10 adverse childhood experiences were much more likely to have negative health problems, lots of them, including cancer, lung disease, very, very poor mental health, very intensive mental health issues, very poor relationships. If you had had lots and lots of negative childhood experiences, these particular specific, very bad adverse childhood experiences, it made a massive impact, not just on being a child, not just on being a teenager, but on so many parts of adult life, which is a very worrying thing to think. The most amazing thing about the study was the ability for things to mitigate the bad things that had happened to people. What they found was that people who had felt that they had had somebody who cared about them at any point during their childhood, even if they had had these adverse childhood experiences, were less likely to get ill later on. People who could actively identify even one adult who had actively cared about them despite these terrible things that were happening to them, those people lived longer and healthier lives than others in the same category with the same amount of adverse childhood experiences. They had fewer health conditions, they had better relationships, they were more able to function in society, even if they'd had loads of very terrible things happen to them. So the interesting thing about this particular study is obviously, you know, we don't want anyone to have bad childhood experiences, but there are very obvious things that mitigate how badly they affect people. And one of them is this real feeling that somebody cares about you. And that's exactly what we do in the early years. You know, it's such a huge part of the early years curriculum is making children feel cared about, wanted, that when they walk in the room, we're excited to see them. Hey, Bunny, it's so lovely you're here today. I've missed you over the weekend. That's what we do in the early years, you know, when we've got these educators that they don't know how to sing, but they sing these beautiful songs of the children, and it's a bit off key, but it's really fantastic. It's because we love these kids, and it's the transmission of the love, the care, the want to be with those children that actively reverses the problems that come along with adverse childhood experiences. And we can do that through therapy, but we can 100% do that in the early years on a daily basis by looking pleased to see children, by investing in them, by remembering the things they've told you, by knowing when their birthdays are, by making them feel special. We can be the protective factors in the lives of these children as they get older, that they remember it was my nursery worker, Betty, who always, you know, cuddled me on the carpet when I was waiting to do the register. That was one of the things that really kept me happy when I was a child, even though I lived in a really scary home. It really makes a difference. So that's what the ACE study kind of found, that lots of horrible things can happen to people, and they do make this really physical impact on people and an emotional impact, but we can be the protective factors. And that's part of the thing that makes me proud to do my job, is to know that I can be a protective factor for someone in their life. And you absolutely can, you know, wherever you are in the world, however many kids you work with every day, you can be a protective factor. And you do it by investing, being present, doing all those things, you know, being an active participant in a child's life and making them feel wanted and valuable.
Yeah, I think, and especially with, you know, ACEs, the relationship is so important. So that's why, you know, we do things like the key worker, and we're responsive and attentive to children's needs. Because we always get, it doesn't matter what webinar we do, we get questions on behavior. And so we've done multiple webinars on behavior. We have a course on behavior on app.cloudacademy.com. But in the chat, people are asking, you know, if a child is behaving in a certain way, they're not responding to, you know, the general tips, what do we do? Or maybe they're behaving in a certain way and they're looking to see if they're getting some type of attention or reaction. And, you know, I'll leave it to you, but I always say, and I've said it in almost every webinar, all behavior is communication. So why 100%. Are they behaving?
I always say, if you can think of, there's a phrase, you know, people say attention seeking kids, right? Attention. He's really attention seeking. She's really attention seeking. She's always the one. She's really attention seeking. You can change in your brain the word attention to the word attachment seeking. You completely change your perspective on that child. That child is reaching out for connection to the universe. They are hoping to make a connection with other people. They are attachment seeking. They are seeking love, which is why they have to shout louder than others, because they need it more than other people. And it's that thing. I think one of the other things I always found very easy to work with in the early years is the children are so little. If you can step back and see how small they are, and how tiny they are, and how much of the world they're trying to, like, you know, travel through alone, and from being so small, and there's so many things they've got to do, and they're so tiny. And some of the children in your nurseries or your settings will have had a worse life than you, and they are so tiny. They couldn't be smaller. They couldn't have fewer. They couldn't have better. They don't have armor, they haven't got experience, and on a daily basis, they are having a worse life than you. I mean, that is something that I find so incredibly impactful to think about. How are they surviving, these tiny, tiny people? And it makes a big difference if you can imagine it that way. I think when you look at them, how small they are and how much they have to deal with, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I always say relationship seeking. So I love attachment seeking as well, though. So I think I'm going to switch to that. And that empathy that you're talking about, you know, really seeing it from their point of view. They're so tiny, and some tiny humans have gone through so much more than, you know, I will ever go through in my life. So you have to wonder, how can we just help them? How can we understand where they're coming from? And we're almost coming to the end. And I really just wanted, you know, I've put your email in the chat. We have had your Instagram at the start of the webinar, but are there any other resources you'd recommend? Like, I know your website, your Instagram. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I also run another account. It's called Helping Families. And we, Helping Families UK, you can find on Instagram. And we have a website with documents that talk about specific things like getting kids prepared for overnight trips, for example, or tips for, like, very specific tips for helping children manage anxiety, like really easy ones that children can take with them where they go, and you can just pull it out of the bag, like you can laminate it and take it with you, sort of thing. So you can find that on Helping Families. I think it's helpingfamilies.co.uk, and also Helping Families Instagram, it's Helping Families UK. And we try to kind of update and make content that's useful, like actual documents for schools that are useful to think about things about being trauma informed and other things like that. And I really would just be thinking about what other reading books are you using in your nurseries, which books and stories, like there's that lovely one, The Colour Monster. I don't know if anyone's been using that one, it's gorgeous. There are loads. I'm going to give it, I'll send some links to Wendy about different books you can use for helping kids with emotions and talking things through, and just having a bit more kind of a nursery where people talk about feelings and it's part of what we do. Makes a very big difference.
Great. And our last question, I've asked you a lot of hard questions and you've done amazing. What's one thing you wish every parent or educator knew about supporting children in coping with big emotions?
I think the big thing is that parents and educators have to work on themselves about emotions and how we feel emotions, and work out when you're in the nursery or when you're with the kids in your setting or at your house. There's usually things that make us feel absolutely furious or absolutely upset or absolutely worried about things. If we can work on ourselves and verbalize those things and tell our partners and tell our friends, I was really stressed today at work, this thing happened, it really made me feel overwhelmed, we can start to have a better emotional vocabulary, and we can start to be a person that's okay with all feelings, so that we can be better at being okay with all feelings for kids, helping them to grow and be able to be supported.
Amazing. And we were just kind of on time. So I'd just like to thank Saskia now for giving us like just over an hour of your time, so many practical tips. And like I said, this is being recorded. It'll be on teachcloud.com/webinars. We'll also have a page with some of the resources that Saskia would recommend, her email, Instagram. Yeah, and you can also find courses on behavior and guiding children's behavior, informed practice with regards to trauma on app.cloudacademy.com.